everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeline, and in today's video I'm going to be doing part 2 of my what fabrics can you use for punch needle. And in today's video I have all different fabrics that I knit. So I'm going to be seeing, can you punch needle into knit fabrics? And in front of me I have 4 different weights. So I have lace, sport, DK, and worsted. I have different size punch needles. So I have the regular wooden Oxford punch needle. And then I have one of the boy adjustable ones, so I have different sizes, and I'll test each one of those out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip the camera around and I'll zoom in nice and close so you can see what I'm working on as I'm doing it. And if you're interested in the other part of this video where I looked at different store-bought fabrics like burlap, punch needle cloth, linen, different things like that, I'll leave that one linked down below, and I'll also put it up in a little card on the side of the screen. So if you're looking for that one, click right there. So let's get started. So first I'm just going to talk a little bit about each of these samples. So how I knit these is I basically took the smallest recommended knitting needle size for each weight of yarn because I wanted to make sure they were fairly tightly knit. So this one's a lace weight yarn. This one's Brooklyn Tweed Veil. And I knit this on a size US 0. Next up, this one's a Shibui yarn. This one's Brooklyn Tweed Arbor. And then this one's Brooklyn Tweed Shelter. And the reason I chose more rustic yarns or like pure wool yarns that aren't superwash is because these are kind of like, I guess I'll use the word stickiest yarns. So they have the most texture for other things to grab onto. So I'm less afraid about the yarn slipping through and not catching as I do each one of the loops. So that's why I chose pure wool yarns that aren't superwash for this project. So I'm gonna start off with the lightest weight, or this lace weight right here. I'm gonna put it in my hoop and then we'll give it a try. So with this lace weight yarn, right now I have my 2.2 millimeter adjustable Bowie punch needle. And then this is some fingering weight yarn. Okay, so that one wasn't catching at all. Since the fingering weight yarn wasn't catching at all, I'm gonna increase my punch needle size so that I can increase the size of the yarn that I'm punching through. So this yarn right here is a really fun textured yarn. If I remember correctly, this one's like between a DK and a worsted weight. So that one worked out really quite well. Here's the back side, front side. The textured yarn worked out really, really well. And now next up on this lace weight yarn again, I'm gonna be trying just some regular worsted weight yarn. So this is Vanna's Choice yarn. So both of those ended up working out really nicely. So if you have some of this lace weight or even fingering weight knitting, I would recommend going with the DK or worsted weight yarn and one of these Oxford punch needles. And also just make sure you go really, really slowly, right? I was being so careful to make sure I didn't break any of these stitches, because then of course you'll have a lot of unraveling happening and it won't be an easy thing to fix. And it also looked fine when I took it off the hoop as well. It doesn't look stretched out or anything like that, because I did have to pull it fairly tight to get it on the hoop, and then I had to hold it even when I was punching through it, but it didn't affect the fabric at all. So next up, I'm gonna try the next higher weight, which is the sport weight. So when I put each one of these into the hoop, I am trying to pull it tighter in each direction as well, just to make it a little easier. You can still see how loose it is, but try to get it a little bit tighter. So first up, I have the textured yarn again. So that one worked out really nicely again. And on this weight of yarn too, it was easier to follow a path and figure out like how to keep a line straight because the stitches are a little bit larger. Whereas on this one, I just kind of had to guess where was next because they kept on kind of moving all over the place and stretching out, and I didn't want to break them as much. So it was much easier to follow a path on this sport weight yarn. And now here's the Vanna's Choice yarn. And then there's the Vanna's Choice again. So I would say with this sport weight yarn, you would be fine using anything from a DK up through a worsted. And it can really be any texture yarn as well, because like this is it's a soft wool, but it's also not a superwash wool. And then this one's like an acrylic wool as well. So I have no problem getting the stitches to stay. And they do look really pretty full as well. When I take it off, they do look a little bit bent in where I did all the punch needling. For this one, I'll start with the Vanna's Choice since I already have my punch needle. And again, this one's DK weight. So there's that one. And I basically went through each one of these holes in the knitting on this DK weight. You can see through it a bit. Overall, all the stitches caught. The only time they didn't was right at the beginning, and that's because I didn't have enough yarn basically unwound from the ball and it was pulling itself out. So that was more my error than the fabric's error. But I just went back and fixed that at the end. But yeah, didn't have any trouble getting them to catch, but it does look a little bit more empty at this point. So that one I had trouble a couple of times getting it to catch. And there it is on the other side. Now lastly, I'm going to try the worsted weight. So that one you can also see a bit of the red peeking through, but not too much. The fabric does bend again, but I feel like you really only mainly notice that from the back. From the front, it just kind of looks like the loops are there. So after trying it out on a bunch of different weights, my favorite was this sport weight. I think it looks really full and nice. You do get a little bit of the bending on the back, but that really happened on all the weights. The only one it didn't happen as much on was this lace weight. It happened a little bit, but not much at all. But realistically, I don't think many people are gonna be knitting a full project out of lace weight yarn. Just to knit this rectangle, it took me a really long time. So I'm guessing a lot of people won't come to this situation. So I would recommend somewhere around a sport weight yarn. The DK weight also ended up looking pretty nice. The Vanna's Choice I think actually looked a little bit better. If you get close up though, you can see some of the blue peeking through. And that again happened on the worsted weight as well. Then a couple tips if you are punch needling into knitting yarn. So first things first, when you put it on the hoop, make sure you do pull it pretty tight. And then I also tried to stretch it out with my fingers right around where I was punching, just to prevent the fabric from, like, it stretches a lot. So the fabric will just keep on bending further and further in. I was trying to prevent that. Next thing to keep in mind is when you are punch needling in, you want to pay attention to whether you want the bumps to be on the wrong side of your work or the right side of your work. So in all my samples, when I was punching, I had basically the knit stitches, or the right side of my work, facing towards me as I was punching in. So all my bumps ended up being on the wrong side of my work, or the purl bump side. So just something to keep in mind when you're doing your work. And then I would also just recommend, if you're using something that's really tightly knit, like this lace weight, just go really, really slowly, because again, in all of these yarns, you don't want to break any of your work, because then you're just going to have tons of unraveling and it won't be an easy thing to repair at all. So go really slowly. But yeah, overall, I would say you can punch needle into knitting yarns. I would say, or sorry, knit samples. I would stick to the worsted weight yarns and this Oxford punch needle. Anything smaller than this tends to just slip through. So even on the largest size adjustable one, this one was actually the 3mm. I think I accidentally said 2.2mm. This one's the 3mm size, which is the largest one in the adjustable set. Even with, and with the fingering weight yarn, it just kept slipping right through. So I think you do need something a little bit larger just to be able to stay in the fabric. I hope you enjoyed this video today. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them down below. And if you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe. I'm putting out new videos weekly, so keep an eye out for all those. I'll see you in my next one.